Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Think Like a Thought Leader show, where Black entrepreneurs, leaders, and changemakers like you come to learn how to build wealthy legacies related to the work that you do in the world. And I'm here with my good friend, LaForce Baker. Hey, LaForce, how you doing?
Hey, I'm awesome, Courtney. Can't complain. What about yourself?
I'm doing well. I'm hanging in there. And I'm really excited to have this conversation with you because I jokingly say that we go back like four flats on the Cadillac. We actually went to college together. So I've seen
Yeah.
your entrepreneur journey and I've, had the great honor of witnessing it. And I'm really looking forward to all of the thought leader gems that you will drop. But before we get started, I encourage those of you who are watching and listening to this right now to share this conversation with someone who you believe needs to see or hear it. Today, we're going to be talking about the power of the pivot. LaForce is an entrepreneur. We started out almost, around the same time. I think you have a couple years on me in entrepreneurship, and you recently had to pivot your entire business as a result of the pandemic. And so November is all about helping you build a better business. And to be honest, we often hear about or we see the wins that a lot of entrepreneurs out there show us, but I think very rarely do we really dive into the journey and to the concept of the pivot, right? Because there are going to be times where you're going to have to pivot your business if it's going to survive, because it's either adapt or die. And LaForce has lived in the pivot, and I'm looking forward to hearing about that journey. So, LaForce, for those who aren't familiar with you, can you talk about the story behind your company, MoonMeals? How did you start it, and why did you start it?
Yeah, sure. So, Moon Mills is very, very personal for me. I'm originally from Chicago, the south side of Chicago to be exact. And where I grew up on the south side of Chicago, unfortunately, there just was not a whole lot of healthy options. So, I grew up in what's effectively called a food desert, where there's not a lot of access to fresh food. And because of that, I ended up being a pretty fat kid. Didn't have a whole lot of options available to me. And so, I self taught myself how to make healthier versions of my grandmother's cooking. I mean, she makes amazing sweet potato pies and, greens and all the type of stuff that, we like eating, but a lot of that stuff, it adds to the waistline, it's maybe not the best for you nutrition wise. And so I learned how to make healthier versions of those things so I can be able to lose weight and do things like even, train for the Chicago Marathon. And that was life changing for me. And so I wanted to make it easier for people to, not sacrifice in terms of the taste with the food that they eat, but also still get the nutritional benefit from their food and it not be laden with calories. And so I started this company, Moon Meals, now 8.5 years ago, believe it or not. Um, After, I was working late nights at uh, this large marketing and branding consultancy for clients like Kraft Foods, Conagra, and Nestle. And I'm helping them build out these $1 billion portfolios for Kraft mac and cheese and Oscar Mayer Wiener hot dogs and stuff that is really not that good for you. And at first, I felt like this cognitive dissonance, like, oh man, I'm helping make all this money for these companies that are pushing unhealthy products on people. But then for me, I don't eat that stuff. And then number two, those are the things that made me fat as a kid. And so, I started this company to give people healthier options, as opposed to those options, because people eat those options because they're fast and they're cheap. I wanted to give people something that was relatively affordable, use high quality ingredients. I focus on plant based or vegan. I'm not saying you have to be vegan, but if you incorporate more plants into your diet, 9 times out of 10, particularly if it's in a healthy way, you're going to probably be healthier. You're going to probably lose a little weight. You're going to probably feel better, look better. And so I focus all of our stuff on plant based, meats, cheeses, and sauces. We combined that into making really tasty grab and go meals. Our best seller is something called the Fiesta Wrap. It's a grab and go burrito that's very, very tasty. And we, over the years, we scaled that up. We started at one little mom and pop coffee shop that took a shot on us, and they said, "Hey, let's try out this vegan thing." And that was again 8.5 years ago when vegan and
Yeah.
plant based was not a thing. Slutty vegan didn't exist. So I started with that one mom and pop coffee shop. It became one of the top sellers in that coffee shop. We then went to the largest grocery retailer in the Chicagoland area with the sales data from over a year of sales at that mom and pop coffee shop. And they said, I don't know, we'll try it out in like 5 of our locations. Let's see how it goes. And that's Albertsons Jewel-Osco. Albertsons is, by the way, the second largest grocery chain in the country. And then it went extremely well. We became one of the top selling sandwiches in those 5 stores. So then they said, okay, you know what? How about we scale this to all of our stores in the Midwest region?
Wow.
And I said, well, we're going to need money, and I'm going to need to hire some people, and I'm going to need to build out a supply chain. And you know, I then went to the drawing board, went back to my board, went back to the team. I raised around a capital or money to finance that expansion. I built out a supply chain that could supply actually the country nationally. And then I came back to them. I said, we're ready to scale. We then scaled to hundreds of locations across the Midwest. And we became one of the top selling sandwiches in grocery deli. And from what I heard from Whole Foods, we were one of the top selling sandwiches in the country. And again, this is a plant
Wow.
based, vegan sandwich, right? And
Right.
so, yeah, we were in Whole Foods, Albertsons Jewel-Osco, and then Kroger's Mariano's here in the Chicago market. But yeah, that's essentially how we have built what we have today. And yeah, I'm just excited to give people these healthy options where they don't feel like they're sacrificing. The average person that eats our products, they are not vegan. They just want to incorporate healthier options into their diet. And so I'm
Yeah.
really proud of that. But at the same time, the diehard vegan, they love our product as well.
That's incredible that you were able to create something that really crossed over and had more universal appeal and it was still healthy. So you started Moon Mills 8 years ago, and you mentioned that it was, way before a lot of these more health conscious, vegan focused options were available. So I'm sure that it was sort of a difficult trail to blaze. Can you talk about that journey?
Yeah, yeah, it was definitely a challenge, to say the least. Number one, when I started this company, I was 23 years old. So I was very young when I started the company. And so, most of the guys, because they were all men, sitting across the table from me were old white men that, took a look at me as a 23-year-old and was like, you don't know what you're talking about. So that was number one. I had to overcome that. But then also, again, yeah, you brought up a really good point of that. We were ahead of our time to some degree. Vegan and plant based was not mainstream at that point, and so we really had to show that this was going to be a slam dunk for the retailers that carried the product. One thing that people don't know about big box retailers, whether it be a Costco, a Target, a Whole Foods, a Kroger, whatever, is that for them to put your product on the shelf, that means they have to take another product off of the shelf.
Okay. I didn't
There
know
is
that.
no there is no unlimited shelf space. For them to put your product on the shelf, they have to take another product off the shelf, which means you have to show them how you need to show them a plan of how you're going to make sure that product moves as soon as it hits the shelf. Because if you can't show them a plan on how that product moves, they will not put it on the shelf because for them, they could go to any host of large multinational company that will give them multi-million dollar marketing budgets to move Oreos or whatever, Skittles, or so you really have to have a plan. I came to them with that plan. I had a plan from day one. And I also started small and then I grew in every chain that I was in. I never started with a hundreds of store rollout when I would, go to a chain, I would always start off with, like I gave the story with Joel Oscar, we started in 5 stores. We did really well in those 5 stores. Then they say, okay, how can you scale to hundreds of stores? And then I said, okay, I need to go back. I need to, raise some money. I need to build out a team. I need to build out a supply chain. I came back to them a year later. So it wasn't like I came back to them like a week later. I came back to them a year later when I had all those things. And then I said, okay, I'm ready. In the meantime, I had to maintain sales in those 5 stores.
Yes, right. You had to continue doing what you were doing in order to grow. And I believe it was Oprah who said something that's really, I think, relevant to our conversation about opportunity. She said, if you do excellent with the opportunity that you have before you, it creates more opportunities in the future. And that sounds like that's exactly what you did. Now, you started off, remember, y'all, LaForce and I go back. Like, I remember, LaForce, do you remember this? Do you remember us cooking together in the dorms when we were in college? Like,
Oh
and
yeah, yeah. Was that at Shorty?
yeah, no. It was Morrow. I think we were cooking in Morrow. So shout out to Denison University for those of you who are watching, who
Oh,
are Denison
oh
grads.
yeah, yep.
If you remember Morrow, and so when you started MoonMeals, it did not surprise me at all. Because I always saw that you were dedicated to your health and to helping others sort of increase their health and their wellness through food. Now, you started off doing corporate catering, right? So when we talk about pivoting, y'all, this is not just a one-time thing, right, LaForce? Throughout the 8 years in your business, you've had to adapt and you've had to grow. And in that, you've had to pivot. So can you talk about what your first big pivot was, what prompted it, and how did it lead you to, open more doors for your business?
Yeah. So, you know, really good point. Yeah, this is not our first major pivot. And when we first started, the reason why I named the company Moon Meals actually is because I was working late at night, like I said, at this large marketing firm, and all I could get delivered to me was like pizza, really unhealthy stuff when I'm working late. And I said, man, it would be great if I could get the type of food that I make at home that was healthy and tasty and, was plant based options. It would be great if I could get these types of options delivered to me late at night when I'm working at this office late. And so that's where the idea for Moon Meals came from because it was literally a healthy meal delivered to you under the moon. And so we started off with delivering to people that work in high stress industries like marketing, finance, law, technology, healthcare, and giving them a healthy alternative when they're working late. We then we had a company that came to us maybe about a year into doing that, and they said, "Hey, I know your name is Moon Meals, but we want you all to do our health and wellness day, and yes, lunchtime." And at that time, I said, "Oh, we're not really interested because then we would be competing with the Paneras of the world, and I just feel like we're just not well financed enough to do that." And so they said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I think you misunderstood. It's for 800 people." And I said, "Oh, okay. Well, we're Sun Meals today." and, we delivered our first daytime catering, um, and so
I know that's right, LaForce. Like,
yeah, so
look.
then we started doing dates. Yep. Hey, if the business is large enough, you will build the team, you will get the money, you will get the resources, you will get whatever's necessary to service the opportunity if the business is large enough, right?
Right.
So yeah, so then we serviced that opportunity, they get us back. We did it again, 800 people the next month. And so now we're doing daytime and nighttime catering to large companies that have employees that are working late for the most part, and they don't have a whole lot of time. And the companies could afford to pay a premium for these meals that use mostly organic ingredients, have plant-based ingredients in there. Um, they can afford to pay a premium. So essentially, it was about $20 a meal back then. My mission has always been to make healthier food that tastes good more accessible to people, though, from day one. And that still is the case. And so, because of that, I wanted to bring the price point down for the meals. And the only way to do that was to really, first off, focus on probably 1 to 3 meals. And then also get that in as many locations as possible. Because with economies of scale, if you focus on 1 or 2 or 3 things well, and you get it at hundreds or thousands of locations, you can produce it much cheaper than if you're, only making, 100 of them, once a week, or 500 of them a month. So
Yeah.
that was why I made the decision to pivot and go from doing the corporate catering to the wholesale model, where we sell our products or ingredients to large big box retailers. First, we started off with the mom and pop coffee shops to get the sales data over a year, because I knew that no big box retailer would take a chance if they didn't see any prior traction in the neighborhoods where we would trial out the product in their stores. And so, yeah, that was really why I made that pivot. I wanted to, bring the price point down, and in doing so, I was able to bring the price point down to $6.99. So from $20 to $6.99, that is accessible for most people, in terms of a pretty hearty meal that also is, good for them. Uses mostly organic ingredients. I'm not saying it's the cheapest meal in the world, but
Right.
it's fairly accessible to the average person. And we achieved our mission in doing that.
So throughout the time that you're growing Moon Meals, you're 23, you're in your 20s, you're growing this new company, and what kind of support did you have? Did you have family to lean on? How were you able to really make this vision come to life? Because we're talking to Black entrepreneurs, leaders, and change makers here, and unfortunately, given our history in this country, many of us don't come from families that have a lot of material or financial wealth to pass down. And so oftentimes, generation after generation almost have to start from scratch. So where did you start when you started Moon Mills?
Yeah, that's a great question, Courtney. So, you know, for me, I didn't have a rich uncle that could write me a check to say, hey, go off and you know, try your dreams, make it a reality. That I didn't have that. And so for me, I got creative. I used whatever I had accessible to me. When I had my corporate job, I had a 401k. I liquidated that. I maxed out all of my credit cards. I had excellent credit. I maxed out all of my credit cards, which I do not recommend that people do. Um, between maxing out my credit cards and liquidating my 401k, that gave me the seed capital to get the business off the ground, up and running. Because one little factoid as well that people don't realize, if you are a business or you're starting a business and you have no sales history, a bank will not give you a loan.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, uh, investors won't give you any money either, because until they've seen you put your money in, they're not giving you a dime. So yeah, that's what I did to get started.
I'm glad that you mentioned that, because you liquidating your 401k and maxing out your credit cards um, illustrated that you had real skin in the game. And I want to impress that upon those who are watching and listening, who are growing a business, growing a brand, growing an organization. I think so often Many people want others to enroll in their vision. But before you can enroll other people in your vision, you have to show that this is something that you believe in 110%. And that's what it sounds like you did, LaForce. And not, again, to reiterate, we're not saying go out and max out all your credit cards. But what we are saying is use what you have available to you right now to take that next step. So, what was going through your mind when you made the decision? Because I'm sure that wasn't something that you took lightly. You tapped into your retirement, you liquidated your retirement. Most people never touch their 401k until it's time to retire. And we already know about credit and scores and things like
Mhm.
that, and utilization for those who are more familiar with financial terms. What was going through your head that made you say, you know what? Now's the time to put all my chips on the table. Now's the time to go hard, go home, and go all in.
Well, first off, I knew that, you know, I I knew that no one was going to invest in me like myself. I could not go to my mom and father and say, "Hey, I need a loan." You, as Donald Trump says, a small loan of $1 million.
Right.
Couldn't do it. so
Right.
so that was number one. I just didn't have a choice in that regard, and I also really believed in what I was selling. So I would sit across the table from folks at Kraft Foods, Conagra, and Nestle, executives that have been at these companies for decades who manage multi-billion-dollar budgets. And I realized they were no smarter than me. And I said, you know, why not go and take a chance and try to build my own consumer packaged goods company? Um, because the last project that I worked on, you know, that project, we ended up taking a business that was $20 million in revenue, uh, and we grew that business to about 80 million in revenue in like 4 months. And
Wow.
so, I was like, if I'm doing this for them, I can do this for myself. And so that was really what gave me the courage to take the financial risk. Because yeah, it was a risk. My mom said to me, "You got a good job with good benefits. You went to that school, Denison, uh, so that you can get this job and all that stuff. And now you're gonna leave that, to try something that's not even tested with some vegan stuff. What people thought I was crazy in my family. I'm one of the few people in my family to have actually finished college and then go on to corporate America and then be successful in corporate America. So for them, that was success, what I was already doing. But for me, I wanted more. It wasn't enough to just have a seat at the table. I want to own the table and
Mm.
give other people seats.
Yes. Yes. And that is why I consider you a thought leader. And that is why we're having this conversation today. So, the pandemic, COVID-19, has hit so many businesses, especially those in the food industry. We saw at the beginning of the pandemic in various states around the country that restaurants had to shut down completely or severely limit their uh, their hours of operations or their operations period. And while you're not, a restaurant, you still get impacted by what's going on in the food industry. So I want to talk about how this pandemic impacted your business. And I want to have a real conversation about that because according to studies, the pandemic has disproportionately impacted Black businesses. It's estimated that I think it's only about maybe 40 to 60%. I'll have to pull the actual stats, but 40 to 60% of Black businesses will come out of this pandemic. And so, as someone who put all your chips on the table, you gave this business everything you had. Talk about the moment where you knew that you had to pivot as a result of this pandemic. What was going on?
Yeah, so COVID made everything real. If it wasn't already, COVID made every business owner take a serious look at the dollar cents. How much is going out? How much is coming in? And one of the things that I recognized early on was that even though our product was doing fairly well, uh, when COVID first hit, I started noticing that stores uh, they were ordering a little bit less. Nothing to like really like hurt the business significantly, but they were ordering a little bit less. And I started to notice they were now that they were going to shut down delis in grocery stores. I knew that if they were going to shut down delis, that's a department that my product sits in, then that means that eventually the stores are going to stop ordering altogether, or they will order, but probably at capacity. And when I do projections to look at what is sustainable for my business so that it's profitable and so that I can make sure that our employees are paid, the chain is maintained, and the quality is maintained, my business operating at half the capacity was just not sustainable. And so I make the decision early on before we saw significant drops in volume to pull out of our stores. It's really hard. Like I reached out to Whole Foods and I told them, hey, we're gonna stop servicing your stores. My apologies, but we just think that right now it's probably not the best time to uh, continue to service your stores, and we want to maintain quality service and quality products. So this is what we're going to do. We hope that you respect our decision. Whole Foods, they were like, we completely understand. They reached out to the stores, they let them know, and they also told us, hey, if there's a time that is better for you in the future, you're always welcome back.
Wow.
So with that being said, we still maintain that relationship today, even though we pulled out of their store. We had some customers that were sad that they couldn't get access to our product, whether it be at Whole Foods, Albertsons, Jewel Osco, or wherever. But we're really glad that we did that to maintain those relationships and then to maintain the integrity of our product and business. We then had to scale back, of course, in our business too. So we're now not producing product that's going to the store. So that meant that we didn't have to do production runs for retail, and so we pulled back with those partners that manufactured our product on our behalf. Those plants, unfortunately, those employees had to be let go, and that really saddened me to do that. Uh, but at the same time, I the resources that we were investing in retail were fairly significant. People don't realize that for every dollar you make in a grocery chain or big box retailer, you're investing at least $1 back, like in sales and marketing, to make sure that that
Mm.
product sells. And so I was able to take that money back and invest it into what I saw as a growing channel for our product, which was universities. And we started with a small private university, much like Denison, when you and I went to college.
Hmm.
It's a small university in Indiana, and we started that about a year ago, and we were selling 3 times the amount of products at that university as a grocery store location.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And we didn't have to invest the money in sales and marketing.
Wow.
And so and so while that it was small, I saw an opportunity that was probably a better fit for our ingredient blend, that the proprietary vegan meats, cheeses, and sauces that I developed years ago. I I saw a more scalable, profitable way to reach people, to still give people a product, and make sure that it's healthy and it's accessible to folks, and will reach people a little bit early on. So before they even get out of college, right? I mean, before they
Right.
start working, and it's a captive market, which means for folks that don't know, when the university makes a decision, hey, we're going to carry this product, the product will sell because you don't have a choice but to buy it as a student, as
Right.
long as, of course, the product has to taste good and be something that the students want, and it is that all the students, they've been asking for plant-based has been the hottest thing, actually, and the largest growth opportunity on university campuses across the country. And so, the product was selling really well. They sell our Fiesta wrap, but they also incorporated our ingredients into three different menu items in the dining hall. So think of like your favorite things you might like to eat this time of year, like a chili or tacos. They're incorporating us into the hot bar, cold bar items, and the grab and go with our flagship Fiesta wrap, in their convenience stores on the campus. And so, I talked to my contact there at the campus, and he's like, yeah, we can scale this thing. And I said, I agree. And so I went back to my board and I told them the opportunity. And I said, hey, we're going to pull out of retail and we're going to go all in on universities, because it will still require a significant investment to do so. And we can't do both.
Mm.
Uh, and so my board agreed, the team agreed. And so that's what we're doing right now. We're in active conversations to grow to hundreds of universities across the country.
So I think that's so brilliant. And what I want to also impress upon those who are watching and listening, um, is the importance of planting seeds before you need to
Mm,
harvest them, right? Because you talked about how you had this relationship with this university a year ago. That was before this pandemic, you know? And so oftentimes, in business, that's why one of the tenets of business is relationships, right? You can't get anywhere without having solid relationships. So what you did was you planted a seed, you nurtured that relationship, and when it came time for you to pivot and really adapt to the changes, you were able to do that pretty quickly, it sounds like, and go into a different direction. So, at the foundation of all of this, for everybody who's watching and listening, even if you don't have a business like LaForce has, what I want you to take away is you still have the opportunity to nurture and cultivate powerful and mutually beneficial relationships. So, LaForce, I want to rewind back because I can't remember when I reached out to you initially. I've always wanted to have you on the show. The timing was just never right. But I do remember when I reached out to you initially, we were in the middle of this thing, and you and I had some long conversations with each other. And I remember you saying, hey, Courtney, I do want to be on the show, but right now I'm just not in the space. So, can you talk about, you talked about what was going on in the marketplace and in the industry when you had to pivot this last time. Can you talk about how that impacted you mentally and emotionally? Because as the visionary of this company, how you feel and how you show up matter. So, what were you going through mentally and emotionally, and how were you being supported in that time?
yep. So, it was a really tough time. I mean, I think that any person that owns a business, you started having a lot of feelings of doubt of your capabilities. Like, is this for me? Did I screw up? Am I a failure? Those were thoughts that I had, and one of the things I had to sit back and realize is that, first off, in this pandemic, this is nothing anyone could have planned for.
Mm-hmm.
So that's number one. I mean, I don't care how much of a emergency fund you had available to you. No business was planning to go in some cases, 8 months now into this pandemic with no revenue or reduced revenues.
Right.
And so, with that being said, yeah, I mean, it was really really tough. I mean, I was depressed. I was very very low. I told you I reached out. I got professional help in terms of counseling. I highly recommend therapy to folks, to anybody. You don't have to be a CEO, to anybody. Even if you work a 9 to 5, get some therapy. Because I did have the support of my wife. Um, and my family via like my grandmother, my mom, my sister, and friends, of course. But at the same time, I think it's really, really important that you talk to a professional, especially if you're feeling anxiety, doubt, depression. You really need to talk to a professional about that, because it's not your partner's responsibility to be your therapist.
Ooh, that's good. I can agree with that. That's really
Yeah,
good.
because that can end up being a drain on your relationship.
Mhm. Mhm. Most certainly.
It's not your mom's responsibility to be your therapist. That is, there's people that go to school and get master's degrees and PhDs, and they're not all good. I had to go through 3 different therapists, by the way, to find one that was good.
Oh, wow.
So, if they're getting PhDs and they're not good, how is your mama gonna be good?
Right. Right. Like mama can put some prayers up, but you need some resources, guidance and support to walk you through this thing, because it is not easy. This
Hmm.
is your life's work that we're talking about here, that was really hanging in the balance. Hanging in the
Hmm.
balance. And so we often talk about the importance of mental health on this show. I've had multiple mental health professionals and counselors really reiterate that message, and I'm glad that you are doing the same, because it's so important during this time. So you talked about getting professional help. Um, how long did it take you to just kind of feel what you felt, to go through the wave of emotions, because you're still human. You're a CEO
Hmm.
of
Hmm.
this business that was in the middle of like exploding, that all of a sudden, it was coming to a screeching halt. So how long did it take you to kind of recover emotionally from what felt like a huge loss?
Well, I would say it definitely wasn't overnight. It took um, really months. Maybe about 4 months into the pandemic to really start to feel like, okay, I can stick my chest out again. And I think another thing was that I did was I actually so I did a couple things. Number one, I wanted to try something new. And so while I'm, building up, this university food service side of the business, pulled out of our grocery store business, um, I wanted to try something new. And so I ran into someone at a happy hour, literally right before COVID started. And they're like, hey, I'm at this company. It's a fintech or financial technology company, which is another thing that's hot right now outside of plant based or vegan companies. And they said, you will be great with helping us build our retail practice, because we need to build these relationships with big box retailers, which you've successfully done with your own business. And so, if you would be interested, we would love to chat with you. And so, I chatted with them, and it was a good fit. And so, I started working with them like maybe a month or so into COVID, helping them grow their relationships with large, big box retailers. And I can't name the retailer, but I will say I had an early win with them, with helping them. Um, And one of those early wins was they already had the business, but I helped them uh, grow that business by getting the company to agree to include this company in their roadmap or a strategic plan for the next 5 years. And that deal is worth like $100 million. I mean, it's a pretty significant size deal. And so, in doing that, and still, uh, running MoonMeals now. By the way, I run MoonMeals not in the CEO capacity. I pulled out of the CEO capacity. I'm chairman of MoonMeals. Um, but we're actually now looking to bring on new management team within MoonMeals. So I'm looking now at this stage in my life to not be in the day to day of the in the operations of the business. I'm looking to now, help out other businesses with the capacity that I've built up, and of course grow my business by hiring smart people. So I'm actually looking for new management to grow, to take on these amazing accounts that we have that I've already set up for
Yeah.
them, and yeah, it's a really exciting time. So I think that was the thing for me. That was how I was able to recover, getting the counseling, but then also stepping outside of my business, helping this other business solve some problems, earn some wins there, over maybe 4 months or so, and then stepping outside of the business and having a supportive board that said, "Yep, that's okay. You can do that. We support that." Having a supportive board, supportive investors, and then of course having a supportive wife and family and friends that are like, okay, like if that's what you want to do, that makes sense. They're like, for me, if I was CEO of my business for 8 years, I mean, I'll be cool. I ain't trying to go nowhere else. But it's like, but for me, I wanted to do it all. I wanted to, have my own company, but also still be able to help other companies, join boards of other companies, consult. And you can't do that if you are CEO of a company. It's just really, really hard to do that because your time is fairly tapped. So I'm really glad that I did that, and my business is growing. I'm able to, again, take on other initiatives outside the company, help grow other businesses, and help people where I think there's a need. Like I've helped a bunch of different very small businesses, grow and scale, whether it just be like an hour conversation or 30-minute conversation on the phone, or making an intro for them that was valuable. Um, because that's really important too in our community. We don't have a whole lot of people giving us the playbook of how the world actually works
Right.
for Black people.
Right.
We don't have a whole lot of people that are doing that, and so that's something that I'm wanting to do more and more. In the next maybe 5 to 10 years, is write the playbook so that we have like a model that we can look up to. Because the reality is we're not going to have the same playbook as Mark Zuckerberg. That's just not going to be most of our reality, or Donald Trump. So
Correct.
we have to have a different playbook to be successful. But we can do it. Obviously, I'm an example of that.
Incredible. So, I want to talk briefly to the folks watching and listening who might be running their own businesses and organizations, and they're staring the reality in the face that they must pivot. What words of advice do you have for someone who needs to pivot their business right now?
I would say the number one word of advice is be honest with yourself and your employees and your investors and anyone that believes in you.
Mm,
I was able to see the writing on the wall when I walked into one of our locations, and there was I looked at the salad bar where it's supposed to be, lettuce and tomatoes and all those things, and it was nothing there. It was just like empty little spaces for where the holding trays went. And I asked the deli manager, I said, "Hey, what's going on?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, the governor just put in place this ordinance where we can't serve any hot and cold bar stuff." And that ordinance had literally went in place like 48 hours before I walked into that store. I didn't intentionally go into the store to survey what was going on. I think I just need a bag of chips or something.
Yeah.
And it dawned on me right then and there, we need to pull out of grocery stores.
Wow. So in that instant, you knew what the move was. And so how did you get the courage? So you talk about being honest with yourself, which I completely agree, and all the people around you that support you. How did you gain the courage to break the news to your board, to the folks that you employ, and to anyone else that would be impacted by that decision? Because I'm sure that's not an email that you send. That's not something that you send in your Slack channel, right? And your messenger. That's something that you come together and you have a conversation around. So
Mm-hmm.
how did you get the courage to do that?
Well, what I thought of is what conversation would I rather have? Would I rather have the conversation, hey, you know what? If I look at where things are going, it's likely going to get worse before it gets better. And if it's going to get worse before it gets better, then let's, maintain our relationships, because the relationships with national retailers, they are very, very hard to forge. They take years to forge, and it takes years to scale up in Albertsons or Whole Foods or any of these places. So if your sales are not good in these stores, it is very hard to get another opportunity to launch a new product, or to do different things with that retailer. And so one of the things that I did was I would rather have the conversation with them of like, hey, it's better to pull out right now, but we can always go back because we had great sales, than to stay in the store and sales just go down, 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 because people are starting to stay in the house more. People are confused
Mm-hmm.
with what's going on, because the laws change every day. One day you can go to the store, you don't need a mask. The next day you need a mask. One day your whole family can go to the store. The next day only two people can go in at one time.
Mm-hmm.
And all that instability is not good for business, for most businesses.
Right.
And so I would rather just remove all of that as a factor and say, hey, you know what? We did well in grocery. Let's pull out right now, maintain our reputation. And, we're going to focus on this university food service channel, which is far more stable, and does not uh, contract or grow really based on the market. The universities, they bring in about the same amount of kids every single year. And they've been doing that since the beginning of time. And they're going to continue to do that, particularly at elite universities. And so, with that being said, they have to feed those people.
Mm-hmm.
And so, regardless, that's going to be a market. And so I said, hey, let's pull out of this more unstable market, transition over to a more stable market, which, by the way, is more scalable and more profitable. Because, like I said, we were selling 3x more product in that market anyway. So let's try and do that. And hey, if the opportunity comes up, we can always go back into a Whole Foods because the relationship is there and our track record is there. But yeah, it was really hard to do that. It wasn't like I went into that grocery store that day, looked at the hot bar and cold bar with no food on it, and literally made a call and said, "Yep, we're pulling out tomorrow." It was like maybe 2.5 months
Mm.
before we actually pulled out.
Okay. So it took some time for you to prepare for that type of transition, is what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
LaForce, this show is called Think Like a Thought Leader. So I would be remiss if I did not ask you what thought leaders helped you on your journey.
Yeah. So let me see. Which thought leaders helped me on my journey? Um, I would have to thank one of my advisory board members. Great guy. His name is John Johnson, and his he, first off, he's a finance guy. Like that's his thing, and that's why he's on my board. I recognize my strengths and weaknesses. My weaknesses are around like accounting, finance, operations. That's not my strength. My strength is marketing, sales, and so that's why he's on my board. That's his thing. That's what he likes to do. He has an MBA, super smart guy, and he really supported every move that I made. And I really trust his opinion because his family owns one of the largest Black-owned food companies in the state of Illinois, and his grandfather was the first African American to list the company on the New York Stock Exchange.
Wow.
And so, because of that, I really, really trust his opinion. I have a lot of folks that I look up to. I have another member of my board, and also as an investor, great guy. He's not Black, he's Jewish, but his family, they used to supply all the grocery chains the meat that you buy. And he also really, really supported all of the decisions that I've made, and obviously support the business because he wrote a large check for us.
Mm-hmm.
And that's always nice. By the way, after I, went into the credit card debt and all that stuff. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that I also look up to him and his family, because of what they built, and they're able to now give back, from being very, very successful in that business. I mean, like, they've been successful for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, outside of that, like, people that I don't necessarily know, I really like guys like Tristan Walker, who's
Yeah.
running Walker and Company Brands. I've met him, but I don't talk to him on a regular basis. And I'm inspired by what he's doing as a Black man leading a consumer packaged goods company, and selling it to P&G. So I mean, yeah, those are some of the people that I would say inspire me as thought leaders, and let me know, hey, it's possible, particularly as an African American man, because it's really hard to find a lot of examples of African American men running consumer packaged goods companies, or running companies that supply, major institutions, whether it be universities, corporate dining, things like that. So yeah, those are my influences.
That's incredible. So, LaForce, anytime you and I have a conversation, we can go on for hours and hours and hours, but I'm going to respect your time. So, final question for you. Um, Out of all of the pivots that you've done throughout the course of your business, what's the number one lesson you've learned from making those moves and adapting to changes in the marketplace, changes in society, and changes within your own self?
I would say the number one thing that I've learned from doing these pivots and just adapting to life is build the life that you actually want, and you will never go broke. You will, if you are unhappy some days, most days you will be fairly happy. I try to, with any business deal that I do, structure the deal so that I am getting what I need to be happy, whether it be the time that I need, the money that I need, the freedom that I need with my family. I've been presented with opportunities where they're like, hey, this would be great, but yeah, we're gonna need you to move to Las Vegas. It's like, yeah, no, I'm not doing that. Because I don't care how much money that you give me, that means that now, I don't want to be in Las Vegas right now. So I'm not going to be happy. My wife doesn't want to be in Las Vegas right now. Why would I go there?
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that's the number one thing I think I've learned, that with all these pivots, just make sure it's something that makes sense for you. I still have people that'll come to me and say, hey, if it was me, I wouldn't have pulled out of grocery stores. I mean, that seemed like it was hard to, just get in there. Why would you pull out? And I'm like, well, that's why me and you are not the same person.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you know
Absolutely.
because because maybe that would work for you, but that wouldn't work for me. Like, I literally have some colleagues that service some of our former customers, and I mean, they're just scraping to get by, servicing, the stores that are ordering right now, and servicing the demand. But when I look at the amount of stores that they're servicing, which might be, let's say, right now in this reduced capacity, let's say 40 stores, that's not enough stores for me. Remember, I'm used to servicing hundreds of
Right.
stores. That's just not enough volume to make sense, for my business. And I know when to pull out, when it makes sense for me. And so, I think that's the number one thing I learned is just like do what makes you happy ultimately. Of course, you want to make sure that everyone around you benefits, your employees, your investors, the people that support you via your family, your mate, but make sure that you're happy first.
Hmm. Sage advice. So, LaForce, where can people connect with you to learn more? To, for those who might be in an area where they can experience your products, how can they learn more about Moon Meals and how can they connect with you?
Yeah, so for Moon Meals, they can follow at Moon Meals. That's MoonMeals on pretty much all social media channels except for Instagram. On Instagram, we are Moon Meals Food. And then if you want just like business advice on working out, because I work out a lot. Like I told you, I ran 10 miles before this. Or, food recipes, you can follow at LaForce Baker, LaForceBaker on all social channels.
Well, of course, not only are you a brilliant thought leader, you're an amazing friend. And thank you so much for taking the time to stop by the show, share some of your incredible insights, and hopefully those who are watching and listening will be able to take them and implement them into their own lives and businesses. Thanks again. Now, if you enjoyed this conversation and it inspired you in some way, then please feel free to spread the word by sharing it with someone who you believe needs to see or hear it. And if you love today's show, you'll definitely want to sign up to be notified when I have other insightful conversations to help you build wealth related to your calling by texting me at 404-737-4957. That way, you'll never miss another discussion when it airs, and you'll also periodically receive communication tips to help you position your brand and business as a thought leader in your industry. And finally, in an effort to stay true to our vision and remain unbought, unbossed, and unapologetic, we've created the opportunity for those of you who enjoy this transformational content to support us monetarily through Patreon. So, for as little as $5 a month, you can invest in a network dedicated to creating programming for the upliftment and enrichment of Black people through media and entrepreneurship. So, to patronize us, please visit thinklikeathoughtleader.com and hit that green button that says let's build this. Or if you're more comfortable doing a one-time contribution instead, you can go ahead and click that blue button, which allows you to give via PayPal. Your monthly or one-time investment will help build a groundbreaking multimedia company that will shift paradigms and empower a generation of leaders and entrepreneurs with thoughtful programming and high quality content. So, to learn more about how you can donate and how you can patronize us, please visit thinklikeathoughtleader.com. And we thank you so much in advance for your support. That's all for us. Thanks for tuning in.